Thanks very much, colleagues, for joining us in the afternoon. I was talking about Friday afternoons, and I know that whatever I have to say, I was telling the other colleagues a little bit earlier, that whatever I say will be better news at least than the early morning news. I know when you looked at this, you looked at the date, and you realized it was not 1st of April. I was glad that it wasn't the 1st of April, at least for my presentation, not so much for the early news though. So welcome, I'm Professor Descartes, Elizabeth Descartes asked that I deliver a presentation on expediting the publications track. Just for information, the session is recorded. If you strongly believe or feel that you should not be recorded, if you're asking a question or so, then you can let us know. And, we will edit you. We may have some options in video editing if you wish for an alternative view. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Saurabh Sinha. I serve as a Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment. And I'm really pleased to have this opportunity, and this opportunity has helped me a bit because I was meaning to compile this presentation for a while, and there was no catalyst. So you are the catalyst in my life as far as this presentation goes. This presentation is, we've got about 15-20 slides. There are a number of slides which have web links. These slides were circulated in advance of this discussion, so you can have a look at the slides, you can download the slides. Last year in October, I also had a chance to give another presentation which was to do with professional networking. And that presentation on professional networking is also available for download if you want to get a copy of it. The reason is that there are components of this presentation that has a relationship to the other one. So this presentation, as you know, deals with expediting the publishing track. So I also recognize that the folks in this room, some of you have had some publications, some of you have not had a chance to publish as yet, and I also see others in this room who are in the top 10 publishers in the university. So I hope that we can also share some knowledge from you during this presentation on what is it that you do that enables you to be in that league. By the way, I almost thought that I made it to that league last year, and I was told by the person that does this coordination at the university level that you've been beaten by your own faculty members. So the Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment did exceed over 350 research units last year. I'm using this a bit to market us, but no. The two other faculties, Humanities and Science, also exceeded 300 units. So there is something that we are doing at least on the volume side, and probably we can do more also in the quality side. So the particular strategic objective that we are discussing this afternoon is strategic objective 1 of the university, part of the Global Excellence and Stature, dealing with excellence in research and innovation. And I bring about both of these components on research and innovation as there are some works that we do, particularly in disciplines of health sciences, engineering, technology, but also in other areas in humanities where there are certain processes, there may be certain regional groupings that are developed, and these groupings may be of a unique component, a unique type, that also allows for innovation, so innovation in the broadest sense. So in terms of the university, if there are works that you are engaged in, whether it's research or project work, that has an innovation component, innovation being defined in terms of inventiveness, in terms of whether it is obvious in the art or not, whether it's novel or whether it's new, and whether it is useful to industry or commercialization. And I'm simply bringing this up because if you are working in works that deal with these three areas, then there is an opportunity to go on a route of a provisional patent before one goes into publication, because often our own publications becomes the barrier to the patent, so one would simply have a provisional patent. Today's discussion, however, deals with the research side, which is deals with the new knowledge and how this new knowledge gets added to the body of scholarly knowledge, and how is it that we could expedite this. So that's our focus today. Just on the other track, in case you're interested, And if you have works that is looking at an invention or part of innovation, the work does have to be covered through a provisional patent before one goes into any sort of publication. And I thought, just for the completeness of this deck, is to provide the linkage of who deals with that in the Technology Transfer Office. The university has different key performance indicators, and one of them deals with patents. So I thought I'll bring that up. As I said, we are focusing on the new knowledge component, and we are looking at this in combination of different strategic objectives that we have. I personally believe that when we have the two strategic objectives, number one is research and innovation, and number two is teaching and learning. And I think that learning aspect is key in terms of developing a research group that then allows us to expedite what we do. But we have other strategic objectives that deal with an international profile for global excellence and stature, as well as building on national and global reputation management. And these two strategic objectives, in fact, also feed to learning, as a lot that we do today is not only local, it's not only global, and perhaps in some sense it is also global. So it's a combination of what we do in realizing the university's vision. However, the learning component is something where we, of course, have our families of students. That becomes a very important ingredient into our journey, because I looked at our own profile in our faculty, realizing that the faculty has got some 270 staff members, of which close to 170 are academic staff, and we have just over 1,000 postgraduate students, masters and doctoral, and about 40 postdoctoral fellows. Separate to that, we have BTech programs, just like a number of other faculties, or in some programs you may have the BSc honors programs, and in these areas research is also conducted, and that all of this needs to be seen in togetherness. So these groups, I'm listing them out explicitly because sometimes we forget about this, but the senior undergraduate students, postgraduate students, postdoctoral research fellows, international and virtual collaborators, academics in the department, and often we tend to think about only in one department versus other departments. I'll give you one or two examples that will make some interesting, maybe it will be interesting to some of you. I personally come from a background in electronic engineering. And one of the projects that we are dealing with, which I think about as a global project, is to deal with a problem that happens in orchards, in fruit production, with lychee and avocado fruit producers in South Africa, where a number of these fruits are in fact attacked by stink bugs, by coconut bugs, and entomologists have been trying to solve this problem for some time. These microorganisms have been powerful in the sense that if you use insecticides, you will also have another productivity problem because you will take away honeybees and other more useful insects. So entomologists have been trying to solve this for some time, and they haven't been able to quite get to a solution. Now, the involvement that one of my doctoral students has had is he takes these insects and he looks at planting little antennas on them. Now, they have their own antennas, but these antennas are just little microstrips which we then use to determine their behavioral pattern, just like using a radar technique. Now, this problem, which has not been solved in entomology as per se, because we got together and started speaking to entomologists, we came across a problem that can be solved with an old engineering solution which has always been used in the military. And as a result, plant green crops, literally green solutions, so that the insects can be diverted to these plants and in exchange not do as much damage and determine their pattern. So there is cross-disciplinary work that then happens, and it is quite likely that the publication that we will derive out of this work may not be in an electronic engineering journal. It may actually be in entomology economics, or it may be in zoology, it may be in a different discipline. Now, Sometimes you can do things like that. Sometimes you can't do things like that. It depends on whether, if you're going for an NRF rating, they would like to see your specialization. But if you're also looking at solving problems that we face as society, then those cross-disciplinary solutions are great. And in this case, the entomologist will have a solution that will make an impact locally. And we will get a publication. Now let me say something about the publications. The journals tend to have something called a lifespan. And as you know, technology changes very quickly, so technology changes quite quickly. That means that the journal lifespan tends to be short. But insects don't change as frequently. So in models today, but if you looked at it, it says rethink and it says reinvent. And if you look at our business cards, you have to often change your eyes, or you have to move in an unconventional manner. So some of these things that I am presenting is actually from an unconventional perspective, because these unconventional perspectives often end up delivering a competitive edge that an organization may have over others, or may have a competitive edge over solutions that we seek for society. And then I've also placed here professional home or two, which essentially is professional societies. And in different fields, there are different professional societies. These may be national, they may be international. And then also networks. We have, for example, the university is part of the Universitas 21 network. Colleagues from the Faculty of Health Sciences will recognize the Universitas 21 quite quickly, as they host one of the U21 conferences. So there is indeed an array of collaborators and collaborations that can occur. And these collaborations may also work with other divisions. So we have some colleagues here today from the division Institutional Planning, Evaluation and Monitoring, and they have quite a bit of data that deals with enrollment plans and enrollment trends. And a lot of this data is quite publishable, because they give us insights into how student behavior and trends goes over the years. So there is also opportunities to collaborate with our professional support partners. So all in all, and I've placed this picture, which is a colorful picture, because you'll notice that a lot of my slides has to do with diversity, and diversity is then represented in that particular way. So in terms of expediting the research group, now in research publications, this presentation takes the tilt of a team approach. Team is a 4-letter acronym standing for Together Everyone Achieves More. And so this is the approach that this presentation takes, and there are certainly other presentations and other ways of expediting publications. But in this case, we're looking at a people-oriented approach. So it is an approach that looks at collaboration intra, inter, and externally. So I also thought of placing this image because I know that some colleagues today that are here are in a well-established mode of a very well-established research group with from senior undergraduate students right to postgraduate, and in some cases you also have pre-university students involved, so you have the whole pipeline engaged. But if you're just starting out, you may find that it is not always as easy. So I personally started in publications probably about 13 years ago. I went over 100 publications last year, averaging at about, probably last year I think I was at 12 units, but my group as a whole produced 25 units. And this year we are at about 25 units. So my colleagues that are looking, there are a couple from the Faculty of Engineering, so you can imagine why we have, our expectations can be sometimes a bit high. But I can really tell you that my secret is I have built undergraduate students that graduated with me in 2002, 2003 are still in touch with me. Some of them have graduated with their doctorate 4 years ago, and they are still continuing to work on book publications. I don't think that they've realized that they've graduated. That's sort of the link that we have. We've never stopped communicating. Some are outside the country, some are in within Africa, some are outside of the continent, and we continue. So this really, I think, is very important in how this business works. So the alumni and the relationship that starts when our students are with us, whether they become postgraduates, they become graduates, they become alumni. And the other component that I must stress, at least from my own experience, which is not always easy, because it is natural for us to, just think about, if you come from the humanities, you look down upon these engineers. You do, right? You look down upon these engineers that are often in their little corners, right? And that is sometimes true, because engineering and a number of other disciplines, I'm sure that some engineers have the same opinion of other disciplines, is that we don't like to work with other disciplines. And it's because it's not easy and it's almost not that natural. So technical diversity, geographical diversity, demographical diversity, this really becomes quite important because it gives us a different lens. And as much as it may not be easy, I'll give you an example that I used to do when I used to teach the innovation course in my former life when I was involved in some teaching and learning, where I used to ask electronic engineering students how they will solve the problem of algae in a pond. And they'll all come up with very complex solutions that deal with all sorts of sensing and all sorts of powering. And then we would ask biologists the same questions, and they will ask about introducing different varieties of fish. One is a sustainable solution. It doesn't require battery power. It doesn't even require maintenance. But it solves the problem, and it solves the problem in a different way. So the technical diversity, along with other forms of diversity, is quite important. The other part is that we often find that we are collaborating with somebody in the Far East or on the West, but we're not always collaborating with people on the continent. And I think that this is perhaps a gap. And fortunately, the University of Johannesburg, with our own aspiration to become a Pan-African epicenter for critical engagement, this does enable us to speak more within the continent, and I think that there is a great opportunity. If you're thinking about citations, nobody really differentiates whether you get a citation from the US or whether you get a citation from the continent. And it appears that the majority of our citations is outside of the continent. Yet, when I think about it naturally, it seems that there will be more people on the continent that will be more likely to cite South African publications, because we have association both geographically, but also because South Africa is very representative of diversity of the continent. I have these dollar signs that really become serious since this midnight. This presentation, as you know, was prepared in advance and was delivered in advance. And so I also place this here because sustainable partnerships, which also happens to be goal number 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals as put forward by the United Nations, I think is another very important part, because we often need funding for what is that we do. So thinking big but starting small is not bad. And the other components that I did mention already was the networks of course, the continent, but also collaborating within South Africa. I was once working with researchers that deal with water, and they were talking about how they collaborate with so-and-so in other parts of the continent. And I said, what about in other parts of the world? And I said, what about these collaborations within South Africa? And this was also a gap. So it seems that there is certainly more that we can do, and the BRICS arena is another that has funding available. Now, the next part of the presentation goes away from a bit on the people side to developing a research niche. Now, I know a number of you have already defined your research niche, but if you're working towards defining this research niche, or if you have been in academia for a while and for one reason or the other, you have not published, but you are in this room because you are thought to have the absolute potential, as we all do have, in publications, then it's defining this research niche. And often the themes that we look at tends to be quite big and we have to define what is that piece of cake or piece of pie that we would look at. And I decided to bring in this Chinese symbol defining opportunities, and this opportunity tends to lie in something sometimes much broader. And I will go into this in more detail on the next couple of slides. We also look at, the different platforms that we can use, and I recognize that this session may have more folks from the science, engineering, and technology, so I also placed Scopus, which is a platform by Elsevier to do searches of articles. It's something that I find quite useful, and also Google Scholar. And I noticed that Google Scholar has a slogan that said, "Stand on the shoulders of giants." And I think that Google Scholar is on its way of becoming the world's largest library. And at the moment, all the material that we produce as a university goes onto our institutional repository, and that is available to the world through Google Scholar. So these are probably, if you haven't used them, I think they're good platforms to utilize. I think everybody would have used Google Scholar, and the university, as a university, we subscribe to Scopus. And so that's another opportunity in addition to other platforms like Science Direct. This slide just reminds us that what it is that we do, we must keep principles such as SMART, and if you have not heard of SMART, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound, and there are different variances to this, which is what this represents. So in building this research niche, we're looking at some kind of a SWOT analysis, determining strengths, opportunities, and weaknesses and threats. Well, these are just good to know, because sometimes these threats may also be other publishers that are working in a similar area to you. And one approach is that you realize that you develop an article, and the editor will probably send the work to your collaborator or your competitor. And the competitor may give a viewpoint which may not be very favorable. Maybe it's good to have a collaboration beforehand, so that if there are overlapping works. So I think that we must just keep this in mind, such that the weaknesses and the threats are addressed not necessarily through competition, but through collaboration where it is possible. And this is also true for universities in South Africa. We tend to have models. I know we were developing a joint qualification with 5 other faculties, and one of the discussions that came about was how are we going to divide the subsidy. And fortunately, we were in a room where we could stand back and said that if we develop this program, how many external funders are we going to attract? And the funding that this was going to attract was going to be so significant that the subsidy would not matter. So sometimes we get involved in this, these very narrow avenues and say, well, why not to do something, as opposed to how do we make that environment more enabling. I have mentioned a couple of the tools, Skyhold, Scopus, and I've just listed them here. You can always Google them up. ResearchGate is another one afterwards. I've also got a couple of areas where I've placed ethics on board, because often what it means is when you are looking at expediting research productivity, at times we find that ethics in different forms tends to be compromised, and it is important that the elements of ethics, both in terms of conducting the research but also in research publishing, is kept in mind. So I'm going to put out a table here that I tend to use with a number of my own research collaborators. I never think of my colleagues or my postdoctoral fellows or my students. I see everybody as research collaborators. And when we work on a topic, especially when it comes to defining those niche area, that research niche, is to take the broad theme, and the broad theme might be, let's say, it's as broad as sustainable development, and then we would take it down into doing specific areas, and what specific areas might be higher education. How do we increase access and excellence of higher education? That may be a topic. And access and excellence at times are seen as trade-off, and thus might be a topic that may have a solution through online education. I'm not saying that's the case, but it may have that opportunity. So one would start doing searches on Scopus and on Google Scholar on this particular topic and define the various references. Now I bring all of this up here because the combination of resources, at least in my view, the diversity is key to have a different type of publication types. So it's from conferences to journals to book chapters to books. All of these are different types, and the different type of publishers. So, you know, Wiley may be one of them, Elsevier may be another one, Springer may be another one, Nature may be another one, Springer Nature may be another one. So there will be a whole lot of different types of publications. The other side is that the impact factor, particularly of journals, is something to look at. So when I'm going into a new research topic or if trying to look for a gap, this is typically what I'll do in terms of looking at impact factor. Now, as an editor, as a reviewer of journals, some of you have also participated this way. When an article comes to me in engineering, in particularly electronic or any other the dynamic fields, which I think is a number of fields today, the first thing I do, personally the first thing I do, is I look at the references. And if I find that the references are not new, and if the references are not high quality, I'm not so sure if I'm going to find high quality in the work. So that's just me. And I was speaking to some, I also served as a former vice president of IEEE, which is the largest publisher in electrical engineering globally. And I asked some of my colleagues, how long does it take for you to process an article? Any ideas? 1 to 2 minutes. 1 to 2 minutes. If the article is going to be rejected, it's 1 to 2 minutes. When they look at it, and so you may get somebody at the end, somewhere, receives your article, looks at references, and says, this work should have been done a long time ago. So the references, but on the other hand, it's again important to have some diversity, because you may have a classic reference that may be from the mid-70s, where in my field, computing may not be ready in the 70s to solve the problem, whereas the convergence between computing ends up solving a very old problem, but with a much more newer solution. So again, there may be some such searches, and often when we're doing these searches, we'll be able to come up with this. You may also want to look at cross-disciplinary, the work that I do also develops these integrated circuits, these little chips that you have inside most of your mobile devices. And some of the things that we learn about these chips, do you know where it comes from? It comes from from sandwiches. Because inside the chips, there are these layers that are very close to each other. And over time, these layers start to sag. So if you have an integrated circuit designed for a missile, which may only be used in 10 years, you may find that the sagging occurs, just like bread. So sometimes we tend to learn what is mature in another field, and we apply it to a different field. And when we do this, that we refer to as cross-disciplinary. Now I bring about cross-disciplinary as distinction to multi or interdisciplinary, because I know that some of you are also on the track for rating by the National Research Foundation. The NRF rating tends to be a very narrow in where you publish. So if I publish on bread, and I'm trying to register in the electronic engineering category, they will not be very impressed. So, however, if I publish in electronic engineering, solving a problem using bread, that's okay, and that's going to have maybe even the people that deal with bread will cite me, so it will probably give me good citations from other disciplines. So that's the kind of thinking, so I decided to put it cross-disciplinary for that reason. I also, realizing, and again, I was not aware that we will have the difficulties that we have today, but I brought in some more Chinese terms here, and this is the Chinese symbol for crisis. And crisis, somehow in the image of the word crisis, has danger and opportunity. Both of them are part of the word crisis. And I think that this always brings about something that we keep in mind because when we are evaluating literature, we find that there are weaknesses. And when we look at work, we say, wow, you know, those weaknesses, these guys didn't think of this. When you think of that, that becomes a valuable component that becomes future recommendations and starts to identify a research gap. I saw somebody was smiling when they saw this Chinese word, and I must say, I don't really know Chinese, so if that means if that's a swear word, don't focus on the danger and opportunity. In the faculty, we have quite a few colleagues who are Chinese and can speak Chinese, and they often correct me about some of these symbols. So the other component that's here is publication quality, and always watching out for what we call predatory publishers. If we have time, I may show you an example of predatory publications where you may find that the look and feel of the journal looks so identical to what is a journal that is an original journal that it becomes hard to distinguish. And there are certain ways that you can use. If you get a review that is quick and you get a review that is sounding very generic, it starts to give you a hint that there may be a problem here, but it's not necessarily, and it is much difficult. So this crossed out is actually a link. So if you follow that link, you will actually be able to find information about identifying predatory publishers. But it is important to watch out for these publishers. They are after our money and not necessarily after taking your research output to the world. So recognizing it becomes something to do, and then the weaknesses that emerge, these weaknesses are often identifying the research gap. And I'm sure that a lot of you have your own approach. Everyone tends to have their own approach of how this is done. And this is an approach that I have used for my own work, and it's something that has really helped in identifying a research gap, but also identifying a range of other things. So the first one is, who are the potential publishers that I'm likely to publish with? Then I've also put down here, this is a link to the DHET research policy, and you can download it if you don't have a copy of the link of the policy. Who are the research leaders? These become very important because they may be associate editors. I'll tell you in my own experience when I was working, and there were certain articles that would always cite IBM in the way that they do their prototyping. And it was difficult for the editors to realize that South Africans may be publishing with prototyping being done through IBM, until the point that we could identify who are the key research leaders, and in some cases invite them over so that they can come and experience what is really going on here in terms of scientific research, and not only in South Africa, but at times in other parts of Africa as well. So starting making friends is important, and on that term, when I placed this link for funding, there was a particular call that I was looking for, which is called the knowledge interchange call. And this call was not available when I developed the slides, but guess what? This morning, 7:30 this morning, the call has gone out. So there's an open call on the knowledge interchange, and if you haven't seen it, you can go to the NRF's website and you'll find that the call has just opened today. It is a call relatively easy to get funding for bringing people in, and this may be your opportunity to bring the distinguished leader in this area and to consider publishing with that person. Research gaps, I have indicated that in ways that now we're going to make impact. The impact factor, again, in terms of research scope. Another thing that I personally do when I get an article to review is I usually, you're doing this in a 1 minute or 2 minute window period. And when you're doing this in such a short period, you look at whether people have cited that particular journal. And that gives you a good feel of whether they understand the scope, they understand the writing style, they understand both the technical scope, but as well as where is the journal impacted. Is it for the emerging economies? Is it for a global audience? And some journals tend to almost see that as a requirement. It is not a very good, journals cannot require you to cite their work because it's not ethical. But a number of reviewers, always a but, a number of reviewers may look at references of that particular journal to determine scope. So I think there is a trade-off that some reviewers may have that expectation. And in some areas, you know, if you have to work with the latest publication, then that's an expectation that 70% of your publications must be in such an arena. In my own discipline, I have to look at how many are in journals, typically maybe 30 or 40%. I'd also look at conferences, because engineering disciplines tends to move very quickly. A number of scientific disciplines tend to move quickly, and the conferences, the time period is less. And then there may be other publications like book chapters and books. But recognizing this pattern across this diversity somehow gives me an indication of this is where we are going to hit. Again, I can say that most of my master students, all my doctorate students, have been able to publish in ISI listed journals. Not because we don't publish in the South African environment, we also publish in South African environment, but a number of these journals in South Africa are also on the ISI list. And we are always able to do this, but because we are very careful in where that research gap is. We're also careful that the time to completion of that work is not a very long time, because if we are thinking of something, so are other people in the world. And so we do have to be fairly competitive in the pace at which the work occurs. If we do sometimes find that the work is becoming parallel to somebody else, we reach out and we say that this is the angle we are taking and you are investigating that. Is it possible for us to collaborate, and you publish on this, maybe we publish 2 papers instead of 1, your focus is on this angle, my focus is on that angle. So when we do this table, we set up this table, I personally set it up on Scopus with a string, which I then continue to utilize throughout the journey of this master's, doctoral, postdoctoral work to ensure that any key work that comes about, we have a way of fostering some relationship. Okay, so when I put together these slides, I sent it over to Dr. Carol Montrello, who's our Executive Director for Research and Innovation, and she said I should say something about short, medium, and long-term planning. And here is obviously to keep in mind the resources that we have. So this is a typical project management chart where you have the resources to keep in mind, and these are not just your students, but also your collaborators outside of the country, which means you have to keep time zones into account. When we are in summer recess, when we are in winter recess, Europe is on a serious summer recess. July-August period tends to be very slow, and if we're working with those collaborators, may not be the best time. Whereas other parts of the world, Saudi Arabia, it's perfectly okay to have a meeting on Christmas Day. So the world that we're living in, we have to keep in mind that the time zones will differ. And we somehow can use that as to an advantage, if we know that this is when our peaks will be and this is when someone else's peaks will be. And so this is about balancing that component too. I'm listed a human and I'm also humane as well, because you do have at times individuals that get overindulged in a topic. It becomes very difficult to take them away from the topic. Equipment, if you're in a discipline which requires intensive equipment, rand-dollar exchange. Did we experience that this night? Right? Rand-dollar exchanges will be immediately something that we will need to account for if you are especially ordering high-end state-of-the-art equipment, if it is equipment coming from overseas. So the funding, and in some cases I've also indicated here community-oriented. I have been working myself in in the area of microwave technologies, but more and more I'm moving this towards how does it impact communities, how does it impact society, and when you start thinking in that way, it appears that there's a whole array of journals on social innovations that one can also, in addition, to the technical areas also publish with. So this is just some areas, some resource components, time planning. Some publications, if you have a work that has been completed by a senior undergraduate student, you think it has got some component that needs to be published. You realize that your senior undergraduate student is about to graduate. And they may, in the first couple of months after graduation, they may not have a lot of contact with you. And it also depends on how you have developed your relationship. And so if you have the person leaving and you realize that this is the scope that you will have, and you want to get feedback on this work, a quick way, of course, is to use a conference publication. But on the other hand, you may feel that this is work that needs to be developed and more matured and then published in a journal article, and you may want to hold back on this. So planning the time is important, and also if you're applying for funding, then that's, if you're applying for a knowledge interchange grant today, you will probably only get feedback at the end of June, which means that one has to plan the collaboration such that it may occur in September. So planning becomes quite key in the way that we do things. I decided to place these here in terms of research output units. It's not always clear, but postgraduate students count under research output units in a university like us, like ROUs. Of course, they also count as graduates that are climbing over a stage, but they count in this way. And then the research output is the actual publications output, and we get funded for this group. Then citations, so these areas is how we measure as a university in terms of research impact and quality of research and citations. I also added here support, because when we are determining our resources, we sometimes miss the resources. Some years ago, I realized that for me to publish in a journal, I must have the ability to do measurements. I looked at the prices of this equipment, it was 10 million rands. I went to the Department of Science and Technology and I said, hey, I want to do work in this area. Would you fund me? They said, no. They said, you haven't got publications here. We're not going to fund you for this yet. So what did we do? We started working with Germany, with Romania that had equipment, started to develop a publication track. 3 years later, we went back to the Department of Science and Technology and they said, look what we did. Right? We got a national equipment grant application for a millimeter wave vector network analyzer, 12 million rands. So building that track, so often we will end up listing and you will say, gosh, I just can't do this because it's impossible. And you know that there's no such a word. It's just a bad way of saying I am possible. So you have to determine where are the gaps, who can help me with the gaps, and then approach and partner. So partnering was very good, and at least in my area of work, and I'm sure it is the case in almost all the disciplines. So I mentioned publication types, and so these are some of the publication types that we need to keep in mind. Obviously the peer-reviewed conference, these are quick publications, gives you half a unit. And sometimes, I must admit that in a number of engineering fields, conferences do tend to be popular because the pace of the discipline moves quick, but also because it gives you units. You want units, right? When you see your dean or you see your head of department, they ask you, how are you? And then they ask you, how many units? Right? They're not asking kilometers or meters, they're asking publication units. Someone said, no, I've lost 10 kgs. Right? And it really is about so they give you units, but the units at the University of Johannesburg, which is a unique model, it's not the case for all universities. So if someone asks you, why do you work for the University of Johannesburg, you can certainly tell them that your research outputs, when it accrues into units, you actually get funding, and part of that funding comes back to you as a researcher. It doesn't happen everywhere. I was at a university where that didn't happen. I didn't even know what the value per unit was, because it was something that I would never see. It doesn't happen everywhere. It's something that's good to use, and I think that when the university brought about this as a policy, it helped to grow the research outputs. As you know, today we are in the 3 or 4 in the country, and I think we will continue to get to higher positions. All right. So that's certainly the national, regional, and international, because you may have postgraduate, you may have senior undergraduate students. Now, senior undergraduate students are also quite important. In a number of universities in the US, as you come into an undergraduate program, even freshman students have the ability to do some level of research to get exposed into not only knowledge that exists, but into knowledge that does not exist, and that starts to build a drive for curiosity. And so senior undergraduate students, through national, regional conferences, they don't cost a lot, but they get you the units, right? And what it helps and makes a difference is that your students are at events, and at these events they start asking about, oh, you are a postgraduate student. And they start thinking about a track in terms of building their own contribution and academic journey. So national and regional conferences, they tend to be low cost from a logistical point of view, but they build you the units. The Department of Higher Education and Training now also recognizes virtual conferences. So online conferences have also gotten added onto this. And of course there are a number of requirements like peer review reports and peer review processes. And if you're interested, you can download this link. If you're going to a conference, you do have to have some paperwork on the peer review process. And it's best to get this done while you're at the conference, because it sometimes requires a handwritten signature. So there's a template that you can download and utilize. Another aspect is that the affiliation has to be done correctly, but I'm sure that most faculties have avenues of discussing this. I won't go into too much detail here. Books and book chapters have opened up last year as part of the new research output policy. And the units for books is significantly high. So a book which 30 pages onwards is 1 unit, going up to 300 pages, which is 10 units. And so that is something to also plan for. And it's not always, 300 pages sounds like a lot. My group last year produced 4 books, and this was done as a collaborative effort. So there was 2 chapters that I attacked, and there were 2 chapters that another collaborator attacked, and we together were able to form a book with a number of authors, all of course with the UJ affiliation, so that the units can accrue back into the system, and the system can then, for future, you have to invest back the income that you derive from these initiatives, either into delivering funding for research assistance or for equipment or whatever that may be needed for your area. So I think that's a huge opportunity. Another thing is that when you have a book and it's got 10 chapters of 16 chapters, they all get listed as separate publications. So your chances of citations just explodes. It just increases. So there are other reasons for that. Then in the area of journals, there are different types of journals. There's technical notes or lectures. These are usually short papers. They're peer reviewed, usually typically 2 pages. And a number of journals will expect you to have your first breakthrough reported as a letter. It's not applicable in all fields, in all disciplines. In some disciplines, they expect you as a letter. And that's because then more people will go and step onto that letter and cite it more. And that then gives and drives the journal's impact factor. So you may find that that's the case. Then there are regular articles, and there are review or invited papers. Review papers is usually where a lot of citations accumulate, but they are difficult to get accepted. There are certain journals that will accept review papers. So in my own area, there is a journal from Cambridge University Press that accepts review papers. So when I have my doctorate students, I ask them to develop their literature study in a format of a review paper. And they submit that for peer review. And we, of course, disclose to them that this is work that will develop into a thesis and will therefore require your copyright authorization, because copyright transfers the moment you have published. And so we manage that as part of the process of the publication venture. Again, I've just placed down the recognized list of journals. If you click on the link, you will get to the list. If you have not started publishing it's always a good idea to start small. It can be intimidating trying to submit into a journal, and you have somebody in some part of the world that will get your work and will make a judgment in 45 seconds and say, well, this is not worth, and it can be depressing. You do have to prepare your students yourselves for such feedback, but usually conferences may be an easier way to get phased in. If you haven't yet published, if you have, then it's always a good idea to move down the track. It's extremely important. This is becoming more and more a problem. I think that universities around the world have much more pressure. If you look at the number of publications that's on the rise, it's really an exponential curve, and I think that's because of the substantial pressure on publications at universities, publish or perish, and this has meant that more plagiarism, more copyright violations occur. If these are also links, actually, for some reason it kept on changing into orange, but if you click on them, you will get to the library website, which provides additional information. But we have tools such as Turnitin, we have tools such as Authenticate that can be used to detect plagiarism. You do have to look at this quite carefully. I had a recent student that translated a paper from another language, in another part of the world. And Turnitin, no detection. No problems, everything works. The student, however, journals require you to provide high-end graphics. So what you can do is you can take the graphic and drop it into Google, just like you search. You should try that if you haven't tried it. I did that when I was purchasing a property here. And with a good picture, I was able to find the estate agent and also the competitors. So I had a very good idea of where to start the negotiation. But the images usually will pick up journal in China, journal in Russia, and so on. So sometimes it's important because the trouble is that when you publish and co-author with a student, you are part of the party. You get, if it works out, if it's a great paper, you get the units. If it's a plagiarized paper, or copyright has been violated, then you also face the music. And so it's important to really keep that in mind. And copyright is a very tricky thing, it also sometimes depends on where you have been educated. I'm discussing copyright and its violations and the forms of violations with one of our colleagues recently, because the university, as a university, we offer training. So we have ebooks and open access books where we have images that we can use for teaching. The moment you take that image out of that licensed source and you place it into a book, that book is being sold by Springer. So we have violated the license immediately because the license was only enabling for instruction. And so the Copyright Office, Tapello is the guy we bother him every now and then, and if you click on it, you'll again get a link to directly where the Copyright Office is virtually located and the contact person. And they are good at also getting authorization, if you need authorization. Then authorship policy, I've just placed a link on that because sometimes there's confusion on who an author should be and who shouldn't be an author, and there are some guidelines available that can help to describe that. So again, the diversity, every year at the beginning of the year, I have to negotiate the research output units for a faculty with the DVC, and I say to the DVC, this year, we're not going to produce as many units as the previous year because we are going to focus on quality. And the DVC reminds me that the more you dig in terms of the units, there's a chance for quality. So don't stop digging, which is a nice way of saying there's no way to reduce the number of research units. Right? It's a negotiation that doesn't work. The number of units goes up. So you somehow have to try and balance this. So, I had a postdoctoral fellow who said, you guys expect us to publish in 6 months from when we are here. How do we do that? Sounds like impossible. And I said, no. You have to look at what is it that we want to achieve at the end of 3 years. Let's sit down. These are the research gaps. This is the real big gap. But if we get a conference output here that will give us access to people that are very well known in that field, so that we can get their feedback in advance, then we start building the trajectory. And the moment we start doing that, we start to build those units. But at the same time, being careful to not let the main meat out. That really ends up becoming the journal paper. So quantity versus quality, I'm just giving you the reality that most of these department heads and heads of schools and the dean types are usually going to also be, I'm giving you the pressure for units, but it also helps from a funding perspective. A couple of other slides on once the publication opportunity has been identified. It may be a good idea. What I personally do, and I'm just giving you my own approach to journal publishers, I download 10 articles from that journal. I read, these articles don't relate to my book. I read these articles in detail. And I have a very good understanding of what is the editor-in-chief, the associate editors, what is their mode of approach? How should this work be written? So I keep the end in sight. And in fact, all my own graduate, even senior undergraduate students, they identify the publication opportunity as part of their research proposal right at that time. They say this is what the scope is going to be. It's a conference scope, or it's a journal scope, or it's this tier conference approach right at the beginning. Then we start evaluating the articles, understanding very well what is the scope, what is the writing style, what are the editorial opportunities as part of this approach. We also have to realize that masters and doctoral programs are not as long as you want to do. It used to be, we are a publicly funded institution. When I have to go and tell people that we produce 200 doctoral students, graduates as a country each year in engineering, some people say, do you realize how much funding we put into the institutions? And so the quest is much higher than when I say engineering, I mean engineering and engineering technology. And I was recently working with some folks in China, and they said, well, do you know that if you produce so many doctorates in science and engineering technologies, and you look at the economy, there's a lack. So if you want to develop your economy, you need to produce more doctorate grads. Why are you people not doing that? And so the innovation, the unique components that comes about. So time-bound is also something important, and I've used the word smart with its unintended as earlier on. A couple of other things, this will help you later on if you are thinking about this, is that the authorship team needs to get together very quickly in the program, because when we come together, we realize that if you and I are working together, I may let myself down, but I will probably not let you down. And so I will work with you on trying to get to an output. What I personally do is I immediately develop a framework in the format that journal requires. Sometimes writing camps could be an approach of getting people together. At other times, you may want to identify senior year project reports. This could be undergraduate or postgraduates, where these reports have an addenda, and the addenda coincides with the template. So making this fun is a good idea. Also the global component, there will be times that we must work with deadlines, other time zones, and then develop and have an organized approach in this collaboration. I placed in Research Cloud. I tend to be, and those of you, a number of you know me well, you will know that I use Google Drive a lot, and I use SharePoint a lot. Just as an interest, how many of you work with online collaborative platforms in developing documents? A few of you, if you are not, try and play around with Google Drive as a link. It's beautiful. What I normally do is I take the skeleton, put it onto Google Drive, I collaborate with my authors, they can work and I can work on the article at the same time. And you can track each other. And then you can get, at the end you do have to, get the flow correct. But this also helps to watch and monitor progress. And as you go from 10% to 20 to 50 to 80, you realize that the journey to 100% becomes achievable. Some other components is that once the article has been developed, is to check again, check and recheck for technical correctness, but also proofreading. And I put down proofreading 3 times. A number of articles that comes to me is a raw diamond. There are language errors, there are graphical errors, there are typesetting, and usually, the reviewers are spending 1 to 2 minutes. And if they are finding that the proofreading and the text quality is not good, they're going to be very discouraged of taking it further. So this really has to be perfected. I will also tell you that at least in my experience, and it may be different in other disciplines, I use US English in all my work. I don't know if there is a bias or not, but what I do find is that a number of my articles go to US reviewers. And then they get upset because I have spelled the check with the Q. And so I don't check out with them. I ensure that I've checked in the right way with the right word. I personally use US English when it comes to journal submissions. But it does depend, and that's also applicable for UK journals. One of the UK editors, I asked him, what should I use? And he said, use what the world of internet uses. So I look out for those things. Graphics, 300 dpi or more. The work that is submitted, there's no such a thing in my view as a draft publication. I serve as an editor, and someone sends me what they call, here is a preliminary submission. Really, and we get articles sometimes on some days on every 3 minutes. And there's no way that I'm going to entertain a preliminary submission. So I tell them that my preliminary response is that you need to work more on this. And the majority of journal editors, and you think are exactly like, not all of them, but are processing at high speed. So the graphics quality 300 dpi, that 300 dots per inches, commercial quality, it must be ready to print, camera ready, must go out. Then the submission process, so this is another thing that happens. So someone produces a great article, then writes a cover letter. And the cover letter has mistakes. So you have a cake and the icing is not good. Would you eat such a cake? Probably not. Journals don't entertain that either. So it has to be perfected in terms of the submission process and the cover letters. It needs to be succinct. If you're having to explain what you're doing in 20 sentences, your claim to fame, you probably don't have a claim to fame. It needs to be succinct. It needs to be brief and to the point. These processes tend to be iterative. I'm again placing the research ethics box here, and it's a good opportunity to acknowledge your funders. Scribble and a number of systems are tracking your funders. So if you're coaching National Research Foundation and NRF is doing some checks later on, they will find that, oh, okay, you publish in this, you acknowledge them and they'll be more favorable in their approach when they're funding you again. And obviously co-authors, affiliation, copyright, and plagiarism. I placed this picture in because especially if you have a new doctorate student, a master's student, you do have to prepare them if they're submitting to a journal, particularly if they're submitting to a journal, that the outcome of this process may be brutal and it may be negative. So you do have to just give them that mindset so that if the review comes back, they are prepared for it, and if it's great, then you can say, well, I told you that it will work out, and you have something to celebrate And if it's not so good, then you can remind them that Nelson Mandela said that the greatest glory is not about just, is not in never falling, but it is in rising to the different challenges that we get, and every such challenge takes us and it helps us to determine the peak and then move to the next peak. So I have, that the work, if it's rejected, taking the feedback, if there's feedback, upgrade, resubmit, considering an alternative publication avenues. Some years ago, I decided to change the question to not how many papers were accepted. I asked the question, how many of you submitted articles to journals that were rejected? And nobody wanted to say anything. And I said, well, can you email me privately and tell me about the journals that have not been accepted? And I got a couple. 45% of those papers with additional work got accepted. So when we get this negative feedback, you have to look at what do we do? Do we select alternative avenues, and what do we do to make it possible? Again, the enabling mindset is important, at least in my view. If it's accepted with major changes, it's accepted. It's accepted. It's after that is to address the changes in a fast, prompt manner. Prompt is key. And resubmit to the journal as soon as possible. And I'll also say that when articles are resubmitted, your reviewers have given you feedback, right? Let me tell you, they're not interested in you telling them why you can't do something. They're not interested in you giving them a rebuttal. They are interested in that you have done what they've asked for. So I normally take the review, put it into a table, and I have two types of feedback. One is addressed 100%, and the other one is addressed as best as possible. But there's no rebuttals, there's no long stories. Remember, they're looking at your feedback in 1 to 2 minutes. If you're giving them long stories, you're asking for a delay, a deferment in acceptance. Reviewers, editors, the volume that they deal with, they don't have the time, particularly for journals. For conferences, it's a bit different, but for journals, it becomes a wild world. But the pace at when this happens is important. It needs to happen quickly. Again, proofreading and editing once this changes have been made. And once the proofreader has given you feedback, don't make changes. Usually that's where the errors end up creeping. And then, of course, the resubmission. So in these words, once a paper has been accepted, whether it's with a student, whether it's with a research collaborator, whether it's someone outside, overseas, sometimes it's 3 authors, sometimes it's 6 authors. My personal approach is I always ensure, if it's overseas, I pick up the phone, speak to the person, and I thank them for the contribution, reflect on the outcomes. We don't simply send an email to each other and say, well, great, when are we doing this again? And I must say that as a university, and as some of you know, because you are department heads of your vice deans, is that we looked at and reflected upon us as an institution through the mirror of the cultural survey, through the mirror of the 360 degrees. And what becomes apparent is a university like us, at least in my view, we are quite an efficient institution. And in the pace, I actually saw this happening, and one of you will recognize because it comes from one of my departments, is where a major master's qualification across 5 faculties was approved. That's a tough master's to get. It means that it has gone through close to 20 committees in the university, both at our faculty and at the other faculties. And it went through the whole thing, Senate, Council on Higher Education, back fully accepted. And the department head wrote and said, it's been accepted. And 3 staff members responded very quickly and said, we need to develop the modules. Very fast prompt. We need to move on. Great that it's been accepted. Now let's move on. I think that we have to step back and we have to recognize that success. so that we can make success a habit, so that we can celebrate success. And so the different modes of thank you in whichever language that you use, whichever approach that you use, whatever that thank you means to that different collaborator is really, at least in my view, something that is important both to thank the person but also to reflect on how that achievement was made. And as a university, as we're moving over to the strategic goal of Global Excellence and Stature, GES 2025, we are obviously looking at building lots of impactful research groups internationally, including the region, but also work that will be impactful. Our vision is not for any other reason, but our vision is to be an international university of choice, anchored in Africa, dynamically shaping the future, and anchored in Africa is a component that comes about in our strive for global excellence and stature. So with those words, if you want to download these slides, these are available. I expected this talk to about an hour. I've just gone over an hour, about 10 minutes. And the slides are available, and all the images that you've seen are part of the Creative Commons license. So the images are recognized. And if you want to add comments to the presentation, there are two links. That's a collaborative link, so you immediately see how a collaborative platform works in terms of providing feedback on this particular presentation. But now I'm quite open to